The human had never intended to be here. The archives, towering and imposing, stretched out before him like a forbidden fortress. An alien citadel he wasn't supposed to be anywhere near. He had come to the planet with a simple mission: explore, collect samples, and return to his ship. But somewhere along the way, curiosity had gotten the better of him. The map in his hands had been wrong, a miscalculation that led him to the outskirts of a city he had never seen before. His steps echoed through the empty streets, a chilling sound that seemed to warn him of his trespassing. The buildings were a blend of ancient stone and gleaming metal, structures that spoke of a long history and an advanced civilization. He had heard rumors about the alien archives, of course, but those rumors were nothing compared to the reality before him. Towering walls, thick and intimidating, surrounded the building like a fortress, guarded by technologies and security systems no human had ever dared to challenge. And yet, there he was, standing in front of the archives, unable to resist the pull of its mystery. The human's heart pounded as he pushed open the massive doors. They creaked in protest, the sound slicing through the silence. The air inside was heavy with ancient knowledge, thick with the weight of centuries. Massive columns lined the walls, each one carved with strange symbols and glowing faintly. His breath caught in his throat as his eyes took in the rows of shelves, stretching as far as he could see, filled with tablets, data crystals, and relics of a species far older than his own. He had heard whispers about the archives, about how no one, not even the most trusted diplomats, had been allowed access to them. The archives were a treasure trove of knowledge, but also a well-guarded secret. Humans had never set foot inside, not by choice, but by the unspoken law of the alien species that called this place home. But now, here he was, standing in the heart of the forbidden. His curiosity burned brighter than his fear as he stepped forward, his boots silent against the cold floor. He moved deeper into the chamber, feeling a strange sense of awe mixed with the adrenaline coursing through him. Every corner of the archive seemed to whisper to him, urging him to explore. His fingers itched to touch the strange artifacts, to learn their secrets. But he knew better. The archives weren't meant for him. He was a trespasser, a human uninvited and unwelcome. Then, without warning, the air shifted. A low hum filled the room, a sudden vibration that rattled the walls. The lights flickered, and a deep, echoing voice filled the chamber. Alert, unauthorized access detected. His blood ran cold. The words, though in a language he could barely understand, were unmistakable. He had triggered the security system, the alarms signaling his presence in the most sacred of places. Panic set in, his heart racing. His mind raced even faster, scrambling for a way out. But there was no way out, not without facing the consequences of his actions. "Unauthorized access detected," a deep, mechanical voice repeated, louder this time. He spun around, looking for a way to hide, but there was nowhere. The doors had closed behind him, sealing off any chance of escape. His only option now was to face whatever was coming for him. The footsteps were the first thing he heard, a rhythmic pounding that grew louder with each passing second, heavy, deliberate, the sound of someone, or something, approaching with purpose. The human's breath quickened as he backed into a corner, hoping to avoid detection. But it was too late. The guard stepped into view. She was tall, her posture rigid, a figure of authority and strength. Her armor gleamed, a dark metallic sheen that reflected the lights of the archive. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room, settling on him with an intensity that made his blood run colder than the walls around him. She was a soldier, a protector of the archives. Her presence commanded attention, and her gaze fixed on him with a sense of resolve. For a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. The human stood frozen, unable to move, as the alien guard's eyes narrowed. She was beautiful, but it was a beauty that came with the kind of authority that made him feel small in comparison. Her skin was a pale shade of blue, her hair dark and braided tightly against her head, revealing the intricate designs carved into her skin. Her sharp features and the way she carried herself suggested a life of discipline, a life that was built on duty and strength. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice cold and commanding, yet not entirely without empathy. There was something in the way she spoke that hinted at understanding, but it was buried beneath layers of duty. The human's mouth went dry as he searched for the right words. He hadn't expected to be caught, let alone confronted by someone so imposing. He had hoped to leave before anyone noticed, but now, in the face of the guard, all of his plans seemed meaningless. I didn't mean to," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know. I was just curious." "Curiosity can be dangerous," the guard replied, her tone still stern, but there was a flicker of something softer in her eyes, something that made him wonder if there was more to her than the armor and the authority she wore so effortlessly. The silence between them stretched, as if both of them were weighing what to do next. The human, still on edge, shifted slightly, his eyes never leaving her. He didn't know what was worse, the fact that he was caught in the most forbidden place on the planet, or the fact that he couldn't seem to take his eyes off the guard. She didn't move, her gaze never leaving him. It was like she was waiting for him to make the next move, to say something that would either convince her of his innocence or seal his fate. "You should leave," she said after a long pause, her voice softer now, though still laced with authority. "Before they arrive." Her words, though not entirely harsh, were a command. The human's body tensed. He had no choice. He had to leave, or face the consequences of his actions. But there was something about her presence, her strength, that made him hesitate. I don't know how," he admitted, his voice low. The guard's eyes softened for a brief moment, a flicker of something like understanding passing between them. She took a step closer, her armored boots making no sound against the stone floor. "Follow me," she instructed, her voice a low murmur, and with that, she turned, motioning for him to follow. The human hesitated for just a second longer, a part of him still unsure if he could trust her, but the rest of him, the part that had always thrived on curiosity and adventure, urged him forward. He took a deep breath, then followed her, his footsteps a contrast to hers, loud and uncertain, but moving nonetheless. They walked in silence, the hum of the archives filling the air once more. He didn't know where she was leading him, but he was thankful for the chance to escape. At least for now. The woman led him down a long hallway, her movements fluid and efficient, as if she had done this many times before. The human, on the other hand, was still struggling to find his bearings. He couldn't help but notice the way the guard moved with such ease, with purpose. Every step she took seemed to command the space around her. "I won't hurt you," the guard said suddenly, her voice almost gentle. She glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. "But don't think that means you're free to roam here without consequences." He nodded quickly, his throat too tight to speak. He didn't need to be told twice. As they neared the exit, the human realized just how close he had come to being caught by the authorities. The archives were not a place for trespassers, and the punishment for breaking the law was severe. He had no illusions about the danger he was in. And yet, the guard had spared him. For reasons he didn't fully understand, she had chosen not to report him, not to turn him in. He didn't know if he should feel relieved or uneasy. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. The guard didn't respond at first, but then she glanced at him, her eyes softening. "Next time, don't wander into places you don't belong." With that, she opened the door, the light from outside spilling into the darkened hall. The human took a step toward the door, then paused. He looked back at the guard, uncertainty lingering in his gaze. She met his gaze with the same unreadable expression, as if she were hiding something beneath the surface. Before he could think better of it, he blurted out, "I owe you my life." The guard didn't say anything for a moment, and then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she replied, "No, you owe me nothing." But somehow, as the door closed behind him, he knew that wasn't entirely true. He had seen something in her eyes, something that made him believe their paths might cross again someday. The human had barely stepped outside the archives when he realized how much he had taken the world around him for granted. The air was fresh, crisp, with the chill of the planet's early morning, and for the first time in what felt like hours, he took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill his lungs. His heart, which had been pounding in his chest ever since the alarm had gone off, began to slow. He felt the rush of fear and adrenaline start to drain away, replaced by a deep sense of gratitude. He wasn't sure why the guard had spared him. Perhaps it was because of his genuine curiosity, or maybe she had seen something in him that others hadn't, something worth saving. Whatever the reason, it was a small miracle, one he wasn't about to forget. The guard had led him to the edge of the city, stopping at the last checkpoint before the wilderness beyond. He could hear the hum of the city's core systems in the distance, but here, on the edge, the sounds of life felt distant, like the world itself had quieted in respect for the vastness of space beyond. She didn't look at him as they walked together. Her pace was steady, but she kept her distance, her eyes scanning the surroundings as if she was expecting something, or someone. The human, still too shaken to speak, trailed behind her, his mind racing. He had so many questions, but now that he was free, he didn't know where to start. "What happens now?" he finally asked, his voice breaking the silence. The guard didn't answer immediately. She kept walking, her strides long and deliberate. The human could tell she was thinking, her thoughts far away, as if she were weighing every word before she spoke. "Now," she began, her voice low, "you go back to where you came from. You leave this place and never return." The human looked up at her, surprised by the finality in her words. "You're not going to tell anyone?" "The authorities won't come after me." The guard turned her head just enough for him to catch a glimpse of her sharp eyes. There was no anger there, only a quiet resolve. "I could, but I won't. Not this time." The human's chest tightened. "Why not?" She paused for a moment, as though unsure whether she should explain herself. But then she exhaled slowly, as if releasing the weight of some burden she had carried for far too long. "Because," she said, her voice softer now, "not everything in the universe has to be solved by punishment." The words lingered in the air between them, heavy with meaning. The human wasn't sure if he understood completely, but he knew that the guard had just offered him a glimpse into a way of thinking that was very different from what he had been raised to believe. "Thank you," he said quietly. The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had. The guard didn't reply at first, she only nodded once, her gaze now fixed on the horizon. It was then that the human realized that she had already made up her mind about him. Whether it was out of mercy, kindness, or something deeper, she had chosen to let him go, despite the rules that governed this alien world. They continued walking in silence, the weight of their unspoken understanding hanging between them like an invisible thread. The human couldn't help but feel a strange sense of connection to her, even though they were so different. She was a warrior, a guard, someone who had undoubtedly faced countless challenges in her life, while he was just a curious human who had stumbled into a forbidden place by accident. And yet, in that brief moment when she had spared him, there had been something more than just duty, something human, even if she didn't realize it. As they reached the outer gates of the city, the guard finally slowed and turned to face him. "You should leave now," she said again, her tone firm though not unkind. "The longer you stay, the more dangerous it becomes." The human nodded. He knew she was right. His time here was over, and the best thing he could do was leave before the authorities caught wind of his presence. But as he turned to go, something made him pause. He couldn't explain it, but he felt the need to say something more. He didn't want to leave this encounter behind, not without acknowledging it. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice hesitating. "You saved me." The guard looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You don't need to thank me," she replied, her voice steady, but there was a softness in her eyes. "I did what anyone would have done." The human shook his head, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Not everyone would have spared me," he said. "Most would have turned me in without a second thought. But you didn't." The guard's gaze softened slightly, though she didn't speak. Instead, she turned and motioned for him to go. "Time is short. You need to leave." Reluctantly, the human nodded and stepped back, turning toward the wilderness that stretched out beyond the city gates. He could still feel the weight of her gaze on him, as if she were watching him leave, waiting for him to turn back. But he didn't turn back. He walked away, each step taking him farther from the archives, farther from the life he had been living, and into a future he hadn't planned for. There was no telling what lay ahead for him, but somehow, he felt like he had just taken the first step toward something that would change everything. The human walked for hours, lost in his thoughts, his mind replaying the events of the past few hours. He had entered the archives by accident, and yet the consequences of that mistake were far greater than he could have imagined. His heart still raced when he thought about the guard, the way she had spared him, the way she had looked at him with those eyes that seemed to see right through him. What did it mean? Why had she spared him when she could have easily turned him in? The human didn't know the answer, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the guard had seen something in him. Something human. Something worth saving. And that thought gave him hope. When he finally reached the outskirts of the city, he found a small settlement, primitive by alien standards, but it was a safe place for him to rest. He didn't have much, just the clothes on his back and the faint memory of the guard's face, but it was enough. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace. As night fell, the human sat by a small fire, staring into the flames. His mind wandered back to the guard. She had saved him, yes, but there was something else, something that lingered in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite place. He didn't know what it was. Maybe it was admiration, or perhaps it was something more. But as the fire flickered and the stars above began to twinkle, he realized one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of his journey. No, this was only the beginning. Days passed since the human had left the archives. With each step farther from the towering city, he found himself constantly thinking back to the guard. Her face lingered in his mind, her soft yet commanding voice, and the way she had spared him when she could have turned him in without a second thought. It was strange how one moment could change everything, how a single decision could shift the course of someone's life. The human had made it to a small settlement on the outskirts, a place far removed from the high-tech cities and the alien forces. Here people lived simpler lives, and their ways were less controlled, less governed by the rigid laws of the elite society that he had left behind. Though he had found safety in this quiet corner of the planet, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was running from something. His mind was a tangled mess, torn between the guilt of having trespassed into a place he wasn't supposed to be and the strange bond he felt with the guard. He had tried to push it aside, telling himself that he should be grateful she had spared him, and that should be enough. But there was more to it. He couldn't forget her. The human spent the days wandering through the settlement, observing the people there, trying to keep himself busy, but the memories were always with him. He found himself staring at the stars in the sky, thinking about what could have been, about the one chance he had with her, and whether it had been enough. One evening, after a long day of trying to push thoughts of the guard from his mind, the human found himself sitting near the edge of the settlement, looking out over the vast wilderness. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, and a soft breeze blew through the trees. It was beautiful, peaceful, and for a moment, he allowed himself to forget the tension that had been building inside him. As the darkness fell and the stars began to twinkle overhead, he heard a sound behind him. At first he thought it was just the wind, but then the footsteps grew closer. His heart skipped a beat as he turned, half expecting to see someone from the settlement. But it wasn't them, it was her. The guard stood there, her figure outlined against the dimming sky, her armor glinting in the fading light. She didn't speak immediately, but her presence was enough to make the human's breath catch in his throat. How had she found him? Why had she come? He hadn't expected this, not in a million years. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air was thick with the weight of their shared history, and the human could feel the same sense of confusion and connection that had drawn him to her the first time. He had never expected to see her again. He had left the city behind, thinking he would never return, never face the consequences of his actions. But now, here she was. The guard was the first to break the silence. "I've been looking for you," she said, her voice soft but steady. There was no anger in her tone, no accusations, just an undeniable calmness. The human blinked, unsure of what to say. "Why?" he asked, the word slipping from his lips before he could stop it. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected to find her here in this quiet place. It was almost as if the universe had conspired to bring them together again. "I had to make sure you were safe," the guard replied, her gaze steady, unwavering. "You left without a word." "I didn't know if you'd made it out, if you were being hunted down by the authorities. I couldn't let you just disappear without knowing." Her words were both reassuring and unsettling. He had never imagined that she would care enough to follow him, to search for him after everything had been settled. In his mind, she had been duty-bound to let him go, to send him away with nothing but a warning. But now she was here, standing before him, as if his life still mattered to her. The human stood slowly, his mind racing. "But why?" he repeated, more to himself than to her. "I don't understand. You could have just let me go. I was a trespasser. I didn't deserve your mercy." The guard's expression softened slightly, though her eyes still held that distant, calculating look. Mercy is not always about what someone deserves. It's about seeing something in them that is worth protecting. The human felt a strange flutter in his chest at her words. He had never thought of himself as someone worthy of protection. He had made mistakes, countless mistakes, and had stumbled into the alien archives by accident. He was no hero, no savior of worlds. He was just a man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But somehow, in her eyes, it seemed like there was more to him than he had ever given himself credit for. The silence stretched between them again, and the human found himself at a loss for words. He had no idea what to say, how to respond to this strange new reality. The guard was still watching him, and though her posture was relaxed, the intensity of her gaze never wavered. "You came here because you care," the human finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't you?" The guard didn't answer immediately, but her gaze flickered just for a moment. There was something in her eyes that he couldn't quite place. A vulnerability, maybe, or a quiet longing. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by the mask of professionalism that he had come to expect from her. "You're mistaken," she said, her tone a little sharper this time. "I'm not here because of anything personal. I'm here because it's my duty." The human frowned, not entirely sure if he believed her. He had seen something in her eyes, something that didn't seem to fit with the soldier she had portrayed herself as. There was a softness there, a gentleness that she hadn't shown him before, and it made him wonder if maybe there was more to this than just duty and honor. "You don't have to pretend," he said quietly, taking a step closer. "I can see it. You're not here just because it's your job. You're here because something matters to you. Something about me matters." The guard's expression faltered for a split second, her lips tightening as if she were holding back something. She looked away for a moment, her gaze drifting to the stars overhead. The human could see the conflict in her eyes, the way she was torn between her duty and whatever it was she felt deep inside.
"I don't have time for this," she said, her voice stiffening. "I should leave now."
"You're safe. That's all that matters." But the human wasn't ready to let her go, not yet. He felt a strange pull toward her, a desire to understand why she had come, why she had cared. "Why did you spare me in the first place?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with a quiet desperation. "What was it about me that made you decide to let me go?" The guard hesitated, and for a moment the human thought she might walk away. But then she spoke, her voice lower this time, almost as if she were revealing something personal, something she had never shared with anyone before. "You remind me of something I lost," she said quietly, almost too softly for him to hear. "A part of myself that I thought was gone forever." The human didn't know what to say to that. He could feel the weight of her words, the vulnerability behind them. In that moment, he realized that they were both more alike than he had ever imagined. They were both carrying burdens, both hiding pieces of themselves from the world. The silence between them was heavy, charged with an emotion neither of them had expected. The human didn't know where this connection was leading, but he knew one thing for sure. It wasn't over. There was something between them, something that neither of them could deny, and for the first time in a long while, the human felt as though he wasn't alone. The night was silent, save for the distant hum of the stars above and the soft rustle of the wind through the trees. The human stood in front of the guard, the air thick with the tension of the unspoken words between them. Her gaze had softened, and for a moment she seemed far away, as if the weight of their conversation was too much for her to carry alone. The human felt his heart pounding in his chest, unsure of what to say, unsure of what to do next. The guard had told him that she was here out of duty. She had insisted that it wasn't personal, that her role as a protector of the archives was the only reason she had spared him. But he could see through that. There was more to it than that. He could sense it in the way her eyes lingered on him, the way her voice wavered, just slightly when she spoke. "I don't understand," he said quietly, his voice breaking the silence between them. "Why are you still here?" "Why did you come after me? I thought you would just let me go and be done with it." The guard's eyes flickered to the ground for a moment before she looked up at him. She seemed torn, conflicted, but there was a sense of determination in her that made the human pause. She had always been strong, unwavering in her duty, but now, in the quiet of the night, she seemed different, vulnerable in a way that made him want to protect her, just as she had protected him. "I came because—" She hesitated, struggling to find the words. "Because I needed to know that you were all right, that's all. Nothing more." The human frowned, sensing that there was more to the story, more that she wasn't telling him. He stepped closer, his heart beating faster. "It's not just that, is it?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. "There's something else, something you're not saying." The guard's gaze met his, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm about to break. She took a deep breath, then finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she said softly. "Someone I lost a long time ago." The words hung in the air between them, and the human's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected her to open up, to reveal something so personal. But now that she had, he couldn't help but feel a deeper connection to her, a connection that went beyond their brief encounter and beyond the archives. "Who was he?" the human asked, his voice soft with curiosity. The guard's eyes darkened, a flicker of pain crossing her face before it was quickly masked by the cool exterior she had perfected over the years. She didn't answer immediately, as if she were weighing whether or not to share the details of her past. Finally, she spoke, her voice tinged with sadness. "He was someone I cared about. Someone I thought I could trust," she said, her eyes distant. "But he left. He abandoned me. And I had to pick up the pieces of my life without him. I've been alone ever since." The human's heart ached for her. He could see the weight of the past in her eyes, the way it had shaped her into the person she was now. The guard had always seemed so strong, so focused on her duty. But now, in this quiet moment, he saw the vulnerability that lay beneath the surface. "I'm sorry," he said softly, unsure of what else to say. "I didn't know." She shook her head, her expression softening slightly. "It's not something I talk about. I've buried it deep inside me for years. It's easier that way." The human nodded, understanding. He didn't want to push her, didn't want to force her to relive painful memories. But there was something about this moment, something about the way they had opened up to each other, that felt important, like they had crossed a line they couldn't go back from. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked quietly. The guard's gaze met his, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and something else, something he couldn't quite place. "Because you remind me of him," she said softly. "You're different, but there's something about you, something familiar." The human stood there, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't sure if it was the weight of her words or the depth of their shared connection that made his chest tighten, but he felt it, an undeniable bond, a thread that had tied their fates together in a way that neither of them could explain. "I don't want to be the person you lost," the human said gently, his voice full of sincerity. "I don't want to be the one who lets you down." The guard's eyes softened for a moment, and for the first time she smiled, a small, fleeting smile that held more emotion than any words could convey. "You won't," she said softly. "You're different." The words hung in the air between them, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The human didn't know what to say next. The world around them had fallen silent, as if it too was waiting for something, waiting for them to make the next move. "I don't know what's happening," the human said finally, his voice full of uncertainty. "I don't know what this is between us, but I can't ignore it. I can't pretend it's not there." The guard didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a step closer, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that made his heart race. There was something in her eyes, something deep and unspoken, that made him feel like he had been seen for the first time in his life. And as she stood there, so close to him, he felt a pull toward her, a pull that went beyond attraction, beyond anything he had ever felt before. "Maybe we don't need to understand it," the guard said quietly. "Maybe it's enough to just be here in this moment." The human looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what the future held, no idea what would come next. But in that moment, he knew that whatever happened, whatever they chose, it would change everything. For a long while, they stood there in silence, the weight of their unspoken feelings hanging between them. The human could feel the warmth of the guard's presence, the way she seemed to steady him, to ground him in a way he had never experienced before. It was as if, in that brief moment, they had both found something they hadn't known they were searching for. The night stretched on, and the stars above them twinkled brightly in the dark sky. The world seemed vast and endless, and yet, in that small corner of the universe, the human felt like he had found a place where he belonged, a place where he wasn't alone, where someone cared. "I'll stay," he said quietly, his voice filled with resolve. "I don't know what happens next, but I'm not going anywhere. Not without you." The guard didn't respond at first, but then, after what felt like an eternity, she stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "Then we face it together," she said softly. The human nodded, his heart full of hope and uncertainty, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel afraid. With her by his side, he knew they could face whatever came next, together,